Let's go through some items that you are going to use when you're sewing. So first, for your machine, you have a spool of thread. You also have a very small spool of thread. This is called your bobbin. So you have your spool and your bobbin. They're going to work together to keep your stitching in. The next thing I want to talk about is your pattern. So this is an example of our pillowcase pattern piece. That's just basically what we're going to trace around and use for our pattern, so we know what we're cutting out. Okay. Speaking of cutting out, when you have this pattern, you're going to have marking chalk. Now it comes in two colors. You can also use a pencil. That works as well because this will all wash out the first time you wash it. But what you do is you'll take your piece of fabric, you make a small mark, okay, and then you know exactly where you're supposed to cut out your pattern. So that's what our marking chalk is for. Now there's three things that are kind of pointy. So we have our sewing machine needle. So if you notice, the eye is right here, right by the point, okay? Then you have the pin. This one they usually have, in class we have a lot of the colored end. Sometimes it just has a metal end, but either way, this pin, this is for keeping two pieces of fabric together. So you'll put your two pieces of fabric together, you'll go in and out, and that's how you pin something together. And then our third is a safety pin. This has some very specific uses, like if you're trying to take elastic through a scrunchie, or you're trying to turn a strap inside out, you're going to be using the safety pin. You may have also used it for other things kind of around your house. Okay. Speaking of pins, this is your pin pad. Make sure that your pins always stay on here. Okay. Then we have a seam gauge. This is going to, let's see, it's going to be easier that way. This is going to tell you how far away from the edge of your fabric you are. It's basically like a sewing ruler. This is going to tell you you're 1 inch from the edge, obviously here to here. This is your seam gauge. This is a good way of measuring the distance from the edge of your fabric to the stitch line. And then finally, we have our seam ripper. So if you stitch and you stitch in the wrong spot, or you stitch through too many layers, you're going to use a seam ripper. Basically, what you do is you slide this pointy part right here underneath the stitch. There's a little blade on the inside in this U-channel, and it's going to cut through that stitch. And you just have to do that a few times and start to take out your stitch if you stitch in the wrong spot. So that's a quick overview. Hope that helps.